readiness. This webinar will focus today on reviewing the timelines around implementation and enforcement, and also ways to assist you in your preparation for the staged rollout. Our featured panelist for today is Dr. Dieter Slops, and joining him today also is myself, Christy Lively. I will begin by having Dr. Slops introduce himself. Dr. Slops?
Thank you, Christy. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dieter Slops. I graduated in Medical Informatics and Biophysics at Heidelberg University. Some time ago, I must admit. I'm in regulatory affairs and especially in submission management and document management since the mid-1990s. And during the last 25 years, I've done a lot of consulting projects in regulatory affairs, submission related. I'm now, and that's the reason why I'm here today, I'm now a member of the ISO Technical Committee 215 Workgroup 6, which has developed the IDMP standard and published that in 2012. And as you know, we are now busy in working on the ISO guidelines, implementation guidelines. And besides that, I'm doing also IDMP projects for a number of international pharmaceutical customers.
Thank you, Dr. Slops. And hello, my name is Christy Lively, and I am the Vice President of Clinical Operations and Quality Compliance for Eclipse Clinical Technology. I've worked in the research industry for over 20 years, mainly focusing in early drug development, clinical operations, and quality management. So we will provide a timeline today for questions. So please, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, enter them in the control panel, and we'll have opportunities to answer those questions as well. And through our surveys, when you signed up, we know that we have an audience today with a mixed level of experience. And so for those of you with lesser amounts, we will provide a brief overview of IDMP at the onset of the presentation today, and then dive deeper into the data models for those of you with broader experience. So if you look at the agenda for today, we will follow these points. We'll have IDMP basics first, then we will review the milestones, and then close with next steps, and then ways that we can assist you in your implementation plan. The primary goal today will be the review of the changing timelines for enforcement. Those have changed, and so we are going to look at those timelines today. As you may know, in 2012, 5 new ISO standards were approved, ensuring a unique way of identifying medicinal products and really allowing for a better way to exchange information between the regulatory authorities and the industry. So we're going to take a look today at these timelines as they stand right now for rollout then in 2016, 2017, and then beyond. So IDMP data is broken out into 5 different areas. We have substances, we have route, dose, and packaging, we have medicinal products, we have pharmaceutical products, and we have units of measure. As you see in this graph, this picture really does show you the relationship between these 5 standards and how the inner core, which includes substances or specified substances, dose forms, units and routes, and units of measurement, which establishes the reference codes for unit structure and rules for units and also vocabulary, really become the building blocks for the more outward-facing standards at the bottom part of the graph. These are regulated pharmaceutical product information and regulated medicinal product information. The regulated pharmaceutical product information really uniquely identifies a product at various levels based on a subset of elements like substance, strength, reference strength, and dose form. And then while the regulated medicinal product information defines and characterizes these unique products throughout their life cycle by describing these particular data elements and their structural relationships. So why IDMP? When we look at drug usage, we can see that from 1988 through 2010, drug use has increased globally. And with that, also adverse events are rising. People are taking multiple medications, and it shows 1 out of 3 Americans over 65 are actually taking 5 or more drugs at the same time. There have been claims due to AEs of over 700,000 emergency room visits and 100,000 hospitalizations due to AEs. Also, there have been over 100,000 drug-related deaths in the U.S. and then close to 200,000 in Europe. In a recent presentation, the following statement was made by an FDA panelist, stating that the general belief is that 60 to 80% of these adverse events are preventable. And so while we see the primary motivation for IDMP is safety, pharmacovigilance, there are also other primary drivers for IDMP. And these have been drug shortages and also counterfeit drugs. There are multiple reasons why IDMP is being implemented. So now we'll pass it off to Dr. Slopp to give you a more in-depth look at these timelines and data standards.
Thank you, Christy. So this is the timeline for the creation of and publishing of the implementation guidelines of the ISO. There will be also regional guidelines for Europe as well as the US, but these are now the ISO guidelines. So if we start from the top, here we have the substances. They are quite complete already. In fact, they should have been published already with including 4 annexes, but there was an administrative issue, so that didn't happen, or it will happen early 2016. Then there will be some further annexes which will be created in 2016 and 2017 and also published then. So that is delayed comparing to the current slide. So basically we have a third row, so to say, for the 2017 annexes. The vocabularies, they are quite okay, so they are now being published. They have been approved basically at the latest ISO meeting at Bern. With the medicinal product identifier and the pharmaceutical product identifier, lots of comments have been received, mostly requests for further examples in the guidelines, which have to be handled, and the hope is that and for our next meeting, which will be in Amsterdam in August, that this will be ready then. Then, because of the development of these guidelines, there's also the need to adapt the standards, which will go on, which will be a change request basically, which will happen also in 2016, 2017.
Excuse me, Dr. Slopp?
Yes?
This might be a good time to address a number of questions that we've had come in.
Okay.
You would mention that the annexes are going to be published. Which annexes are in the first publication?
Okay. The first publication includes the chemical substances, proteins, peptides, and nucleic acids. So that is the one, that's the set of annexes that should have been published already, but will be published soon. The next iteration will be the herbals, homeopathic products, blood products, and polymers. So that will be in 2016, and then what remains are the vaccines, advanced therapies, allergens, cell products, and gene products, which will be either 2016 or more likely 2017. There's no other question? Well, what we have seen already in the slides that Christy showed is that if you look at the breadth of the IDMP guidelines, it's really clear that it goes over the full drug life cycle process. It's not only for registered products, I mean that's the first step, but also investigational products. There is also standard for that, and there will be, as you see later when we talk about the EMA guidelines, there will also be a request to submit information about investigational products. So it starts basically in clinical development and goes on through the regulatory affairs process, through the production, packaging, to marketing. So for the full life cycle process is included, and all departments basically have to provide their share for the IDMP standard. What also is clear that what I just mentioned, that the vocabularies, the pharmaceutical product ID, especially the substances for these first 4 annexes, they are well defined, are basically you can work on the basis of the draft standards already. You can also wait until they are published, but it will be quite soon. The full substance standard, medicinal product and the MPID, that will take a little bit longer, as I just indicated. So maybe some of you have seen this data model. This is a data model only for the registered products, that means the approved products. So what is missing here is, as I just mentioned, the investigational medicinal products, and what is also not in this picture is the data model for the substances. That's a separate one. That's also quite a big model. So at the end, you can have up to between 300 and 600 data fields per product. That is basically depending on the complexity of the product. That means, for example, the number of packaging variants that you have, the packaged products, or the number of ingredients, or the number of contract manufacturers that you have registered with your submission, and other, or also included devices, combination products. All of that is increasing the complexity and requires more data to be submitted. If you look into the data model in more detail, there's the color, by the way, indicates where the data is coming from, and also more or less which departments are relevant for the provision of the data. So if we look at the yellowish part in the top left part of the data model, this is mostly the composition of the product name, the different name parts. So that's, I would say, is more in the reg affairs area, as well as the green parts, like for the marketing authorization, for the procedures and the applications. Marketing status and periodic safety update report, that can be also, could be also in the marketing departments and the safety departments, definitely. You also must consider that it's not guaranteed that this is only information from the headquarters. If you have global products, yes, you probably find it in the headquarters. But if you have local products, you have to go to the affiliates. It's very likely that the data is only available there. Then if we continue in the left lower corner, these violet ones, that is data that comes from the SMPC or from the labeling. So you are supposed to provide information about indications, contraindications, interactions, and undesirable effects. So that is a rather complex part, because it really means to go through the SMPC, at least in Europe, to go through the SMPC and look at the data and provide the coding for the data. Then there is the pharmaceutical product, which is the pink area and the golden area down there, which includes the ingredients. You probably find that in the CMC department, if the data is there. And the blue area on the right-hand side, that is from packaging lines, also manufacturing data, device information that needs to be provided here. Then we have the gray area in the top row in the middle. That is about manufacturers, contract manufacturers. I mentioned that previously. If you have a number of contract manufacturers registered, the health authorities will want to know what are these manufacturers, who are they, and have they been licensed for what they are supposed to be doing in your production process, and by which health authority and when. So basically it's the information from the manufacturing license or GMP certificate, which, by the way, is available in Europe in a partly available, at least in the UDRA GMDP database. So partly you can get it from there, but otherwise we probably have to find it located either in the quality department or in the supply chain departments. Okay, there are also some hotspots. The hotspots really are, I think, the complexity of the SMPC coding. That means the violet area. That is very complex. And and also the packaging area, the blue area. We have seen that if you have different manufacturing sites, maybe each one with its own ERP system, and you have local products, then this information can be very much distributed over your whole company. And you have to really to find out where the data is coming from, and it's not so easy in general. So I think that is very often this is a dilemma, and it's not only things like physical characteristics, but it's also more easy things which you would expect that it's easy. That means how many blisters are in a folding box and how many tablets are in a blister. So even this basic information is sometimes very difficult to obtain. Also, the substances themselves are a challenge. We have seen that I'm currently working for a generics company, and so you would expect that most of the substances or most of the ingredients should be known basically, but we found out that only 50%, maybe 60% are really well defined, and we have a lot of problems in things like flavors and colorants and so on. So that will probably mean that we'll have to specify those ingredients.
Excuse me, Dr. Slob?
Yeah.
We have a few more questions surrounding the data model. Could you explain what code systems will be used for the contra and the therapeutic indications?
That's a tricky question. There are different opinions about that. It's not yet decided, first of all, but it's very likely that for all, I would say, disease and symptom-like data fields, like the contraindications and the indication texts, the coded terms here, that here in Europe we will have MEDRA. Whether this also will be used in the US is not yet really clear. I hope that they also will stay with MEDRA, but there is a certain probability that maybe they use also SNOMED. Why? Why SNOMED? I think that also even in Europe, when they decide to go for MEDRA, there will be some terms that will not be available through MEDRA coding. And as I mentioned, MEDRA is, in my eyes, primarily a disease and symptom coding system. If you have, for example, if you see that here down there, other therapy specifics, you need some therapy terms. And so in my opinion here, SNOMED provides more information. And then in addition, if you look at the interactions, you have to specify the interactants. So the interactants will be substances, very, very likely, that you will specify, but also could be other things. So I think that there will be some situations where we will have even multiple controlled vocabularies. So let's say the most frequent one in Europe for indication and contraindication would be definitely MEDRA, I think. But it could be that we also would need here and there maybe some SNOMED terms. So the next slide shows the timeline. This is the timeline now for Europe, for the EMA. I mean, originally the EMA intended that the IDMP would be implemented July 2016, which was not feasible. I mean, the ISO standards are ready, yes, but the implementation guidelines are not yet ready and will not be ready until then. And then they also need to create their local guidelines, the regional guidelines, the EMA guidelines. So they also, this needs some time. And then also a lot of other things have to be provided, basic information like controlled vocabularies and also organizations. And that's the reason why they have now changed that, and still 2016 will be basically the year of preparation in Europe. So during that time, EMA will provide controlled vocabularies that are to be used for the first iterations and the following iterations also, then delayed by depending on the iteration, and also will request some data about the marketing authorization holders and later also marketing authorization applicants and regulatory authorities. So that will happen in 2016 basically. The first iteration in the product area will be based on something we call here in Europe XEVMPD. So it's basically an extension of the XEVMPD. Some data will be added which are necessary in order to define the medicinal product IDs, the packaged product IDs, and the pharmaceutical product IDs. So that data there will be guidance early 2016, and then the implementation will start in 2017, basically. The investigation medicinal product will then follow in 2017, and the iteration 3, here then the remaining requirements for the clinical particulars will be requested. So when this will happen is not yet really clear at the moment. So that is this blurry, so to say, timeline spanning for 2017 and 2018. Yeah, so if I come back to the data model and the hotspots that are identified there, so you see that well, the SMPC hotspots that we have, that is somehow that will not hit us already in 2017. Only some data will be requested from the SMPC, coded data from the SMPC. But what other hotspots will happen is are the ones concerning the packaging. So the packaging information will have to be provided, and also the substance information will have to be provided. So and that, talking about substances, there is something to say about that. There is, maybe you have heard about the global substance registration system that is being developed by the National Center for the, I think, Advancement of Translational Sciences, NCATS, working for the FDA. And GSRS will be the database, the substance database to be used to submit and retrieve substance information, not only in the US, but also in Europe. And so I think, as I mentioned earlier, that the four annexes about chemical substances, proteins, peptides, and nucleic acids already are final and will be published soon. One step could be to look at your ingredients and try to identify the substances from GSRS. GSRS currently holds about 80,000 substances, from mostly from the chemical areas, and also some other areas. So that's maybe a step to go for. In total, if you look at the timeline here in Europe, it means that if you have products in Europe, you have only 12 to 18 months time to prepare for that, and that's also necessary in my experience. If you want to do all the substance identification, if you have a lot of products, then I think it's not let's say too much time to do that. Christy, do you want to take over?
Yes, thank you. So next steps, what should you do now as an organization? As Dr. Slott stated, he is a delegate and is on one of the ISO committees. So you could follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn for updates. There have been frequent changes, and we are keeping updated on those, and you can go to our website and follow us on this to get updates as they change on both timelines and regulation updates. Also, you could contact us for a diagnostic worksheet to assess your readiness. We do have a worksheet that we can send out to you if you reach out to us that will look at your gaps, help you assess your systems, help you look at where you are with mapping out your readiness through this worksheet. It would be important to meet with your stakeholders. You could use this diagnostic worksheet to look at gaps, meet with them to discuss where your gaps are, and to garner their management support and guidance for moving forward. Also, it would be important for you to meet with different departments. As Dr. Slott mentioned, this does affect all departments from drug development all the way through marketing. Also, you want to look at your databases. look at what you may need to obtain externally, what you do have internally, and see what your interfaces look like and what you may need to still obtain. So we are here to help you with your needs assessment and implementation plan. We can provide training to you and your team, a review of your current systems. We can look at any interfaces that you need or have, look at your system architecture, and we can also meet with you and look really where your implementation plan is, what gaps you have, and what you need to do to move forward. We can help with user requirements and also data collection and coding as well. So again, here's our contact information. You can follow us on Twitter in the lower left-hand corner, and also Eclipse LinkedIn is there as well. Our contact information is here, but you can also go to the Eclipse website or reach out to either of us, and we can provide you with additional information and also this diagnostic worksheet that we will provide to all participants. So we now have time for questions. Morgan, do you have some questions that have come in?
Yes, Christy. I compiled them. So there's various questions related to management of the data. The first one has been primarily around the controlled vocabularies. Dr. Schlotz, how will those be managed?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there are a lot of different controlled vocabularies to be managed. I mentioned already SNOMED. I mentioned METRA. METRA is updated, I believe, every 6 months now. So I have seen some customers who plan to implement a master data management solution, which I think makes sense to support this process. If you imagine that this IDMP thing is now starting, so my expectation is there will be a lot of changes in the controlled vocabularies, especially in the beginning of the implementation period. And so I think master data management is definitely an issue, and it's too much data to be managed in order to do it manually, from my perspective.
And the other area was around coding around SMPCs. Can you elaborate on how those will be managed?
Yeah, if you had asked me 1 year ago, I would have said, I mean, looking at the European timeline, which requested that IDMP would be implemented in July 2016, I would have said, well, there is only the way to use a coding system to really go through the SMPCs, have the coders available, METRA coders and SNOMED and anything, where you really go text by text and do the coding. Now, since the timeline is extended, and especially the other parts, the bigger parts of the SMPC coding will be requested only in iteration 3, I think it makes sense to think about something like a component-based offering system for labeling, especially if you have already something like company core data sheets in which you manage the company's view on the efficacy and safety of a product. If you have that already, then I think I would really think about whether this would not make sense, because then you really you would be much better able to support the maintenance of the SMPC through the company core data sheet, through the USPI and so on. So I think that is now an option but only since the timeline has been extended. And I know some companies who really have already a component-based offering system and will use that, and they see it as a big benefit in this situation.
Thank you, Dr. Schlotz. And there was also a number of questions around the substance database. There were attendees whose companies don't have a substance database. Could you provide a comment on the best scenario, on the best approach in that scenario?
Yes, I already mentioned that I'm currently working also for a Genève company. So they have something like 1,600 ingredients which have to be mapped to the substances, and they also don't have a substance database. I mean, basically they use the dossier as the SCMC parts of the dossier as their information source for the substances. And that's a difficult subject. I mean, if you if you receive a lot of excipients from contract manufacturers, then you very often have no information about the substances that are used in a flavor or in a colorant, and therefore you need something like a substance database. And now the fortunate thing is that the GSRS system, formerly known as GINAS, that is available as a download. So it's basically freeware. You can install it in your environment and can use it, and it already fulfills IDMP. So it supports the IDMP substance standard, which is a big advantage. And you can go into the global substance registration system at the FDA, or in the future also in EMA, try to locate the substances. If you don't find them, then you will have to define your own specified substances within your local GSRS system, the local GINAS system, and then submit it through the network of GSRS systems to the FDA and to the EMA for approval. And then you receive back an ID, and you can then use the ID in the IDMP submissions. So I think that is an interesting option for companies who have no substance database yet, but have a lot of products with a lot of much higher number of ingredients also.
And also, how much lag time is there going to be between the ISO release and the IDMP guidance releases?
You mean the regional guidances in Europe and the US?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yes, so that's what I have heard from the FDA now in some meetings where they also have been present in Bern and also earlier, is that they will follow quite closely the IDMP guidelines. So I don't think that there is a big delay, let's say, between the publication of the ISO guidance and the publication of the US FDA guidance, local guidance. And as far as I know, FDA gives you 2 years time for the implementation, but after these 2 years, then it will be mandatory. So it's a little bit different approach than we have in Europe.
Thank you, Dr. Schlaps. And Christy, how can they keep up with the timelines and changes that are happening?
So one, you can look at, we will post them on our Twitter and LinkedIn accounts as well as on our website. We do provide frequent blogs and updates on these. And also, you may contact us for support at each of these email addresses if you need organizational support, and also for that particular worksheet, which will really give you a good idea of the gaps that you currently have in your system for implementation.
Also, how could they get a copy of the presentation?
If you would like a copy of this presentation, there will be a short survey at the close of the webinar. It's a very short survey just to get your feedback, information on if this was helpful to you, and also any future topics you might like to see for us to present on additional webinars. And if you fill that out, we will provide you with a copy of the slides for today, and we'll send those to you.
Thank you, Christy. And those were all the questions that we had.
Okay. Thank you, Morgan. Well, this concludes our webinar for today. We want to thank you for attending. We will have additional webinars on this subject in the future, certainly to go over the data model. That's one that people like to review more in depth, as well as providing you updates and timelines as they change. So we wish you much success in your implementation plans, and thank you for attending today.